Desperate news for McLaren. The huge upgrades to McLaren that propelled it into serious contention for the title of Formula One's second fastest team did not come without issues, and one of those requires immediate attention. Lando Norris's successive podium finishes were abruptly followed by a disappointing 7th place at the Belgian Grand Prix, marking a sudden stop on McLaren's stellar recent performances. And to add insult to injury, even if both cars had performed under normal circumstances, they would not have met McLaren's recent expectations. This is desperate news for the Woking side, which were flying high recently, so the reality check in Belgium hit them hard. Could they bounce back? And what would it mean for the team? If you've been following the recent races, you would have seen McLaren's increasing prominence at the front of the grid compared to the season's start. The car's performance has been revolutionized by numerous upgrades implemented at the Austrian and British Grand Prix weekends, which saw Lando Norris finishing second twice consecutively in Britain and Hungary. But in Belgium, things were not the same. At the Belgian Grand Prix, McLaren was compelled to use a larger rear wing than desired, resulting in slow straight line speed, and despite some misleading individual data point due to factors like towing or the DRS, it was evident that McLaren's drivers were consistently among the slowest in each significant session. The reason being, McLaren's assortment of rear wings doesn't include a low drag variant that would have made a significant difference at a circuit like Spa. This is why Lando Norris's Belgian GP race swiftly took a disastrous turn, with the dread over his car's straight line speed becoming a harsh reality, and McLaren was aware that their choice of a rear wing at Spa, which generated more downforce and therefore more drag, would incur a penalty. However, the actual cost was considerably higher than anticipated. Norris had a fleeting moment in 6th place on the first lap, but by the 5th he had completely dropped out of the points, and his anguished radio communications, filled with frustration and a sense of urgency, implored McLaren to take some kind of action to improve the situation. When we were in the mix of the other cars, it was starting to spiral negatively quite rapidly, team principal Andrea Stella admits. We have to very frankly admit that while this configuration gave us an advantage in the previous days, it was starting to be a significant issue. The first attempt at a solution backfired, and Norris pleaded to be put into clear air, with the thinking being that at least that way he could utilize his pace in the middle sector instead of being bottled up behind cars that were slower through the corners, then destroying him on the straights. So McLaren switched strategies, moving Norris onto the hard tyre with the intention of giving him a long middle stint before switching to softs at the end. Except he toiled on the hard tyre, and his rivals dived into the pits soon after anyway. Norris was back in a pack again, only this time he was struggling through the corners too. At this point, Norris was performing admirably, but he was becoming increasingly demoralized, and his initial radio communications had been curt, offering little in the way of assistance. As he entered the second part of the race, his tone bordered on resignation, and his consistent grumbles provoked a somewhat defensive reaction from his race engineer, hinting at a growing frustration with Norris's demeanor. Andrea Stella offered some understanding, saying, "At the beginning it was incredibly difficult, even in terms of strategizing on how to remain in the race. The mental challenge was immense, but we discussed this pre-race, urging ourselves not to succumb to frustration and instead concentrate on finding a way out of this predicament." Fortunately, a change in circumstances was imminent for Norris. Like every other team, McLaren had anticipated rainfall, albeit not heavy, and while this could be handled while running on slick tyres, once again Norris found himself in a bind. McLaren's gamble was to make another pit stop, switching to soft tyres and significantly cutting short the stint on hard tyres, banking on a long haul till the race's end. It was betting on the much criticised rear wing to slip the tyres left, shielding them enough for Norris to extend their lifespan until the finish line. But Andrea Stella delivered the harsh reality that the weekend highlighted the work the British outfit still needs to do. "This weekend told us that where we could do work," he said. The car is improved in some areas, this was confirmed, but at the same time, this weekend confirmed the areas that we haven't addressed yet. It gives us a reality check that there's more work to do, and to some extent confirms that those areas, they need to be addressed quite urgently. This urgency, for instance, comes from the fact that a second race after the summer shutdown is Monza. You can't go racing in Monza like we did in Spa. There is a sense of resilience and adaptability from McLaren, which I gotta admit had a less than optimal optimal outing, and despite a setup that didn't deliver as expected and challenges in gaining ground on straights and corners, the team was able to demonstrate the strength of their car and position it as a front-runner. McLaren further showcased their strategic intelligence with an effective undercut during the final pit stop, switching to soft tyres, which allowed them to keep at bay drivers like Ocon. The incident involving Piastri and Sainz on the first lap was seen as a racing incident, with room for discussion around whether more caution should have been exercised. And despite this, there is acknowledgement of a good drive from Piastri on Saturday. The team's experience thus serves as a learning opportunity to inform future choices about car setup and race strategy, with a willingness to explore radical setups like Mercedes. And on the topic of Norris being angry during the race, I completely understand that. When going 300 plus kilometers an hour approaching the next corner, the driver basically has two tools available to get the job done: his skills and the car. If the car fails to comply, the driver is left with nothing but frustration, and it's good that the driver vents that frustration clearly. It makes them human, it relieves some of the frustration, and it will keep the team on its toes to do a better job next time, while also helping the team to understand the driver's mood too, and they can coach him to get rid of that frustration to focus on the job at hand. The tribulations experienced at Spa might be replicated to some extent at Monza if McLaren is unable to produce a pure low drag setup in time and ends up merely adjusting its existing wing. However, as Norris pointed out, if these are the trade-offs necessary for the substantial upgrades that have revived McLaren's season, they will ultimately be worthwhile. Interestingly, if McLaren had finished second in the sprint race and 7th in the Grand Prix in any of the first 8 races, it would have been hailed as their best performance of the year, which is why it's funny that achieving the same results at Spa was viewed as a disappointment. This illustrates the remarkable upswing in McLaren's mid-season form and is a testament to real sustainable progress. Norris's podium in Hungary is more indicative of the impact of McLaren's upgrades than his British Grand Prix podium. Despite unfortunate timing of a safety car incident affecting Piastri, the British Grand Prix was an outright success for McLaren. In Hungary, Norris's excellent end result was a product of overachievement, a stellar drive, and circumstances favouring McLaren, such as Mercedes not performing optimally. The fact that McLaren could deliver this kind of performance on a significantly different circuit in varied conditions, which would have been unthinkable earlier in the year, is highly significant. The races in Austria and Britain might have demonstrated the enhanced capabilities of the MCL 60, but the performances in Hungary and to a degree Belgium are proof of the overall improvement. The revamped McLaren handles high track temperatures and traction zones better, resulting in superior tyre management. However, further improvements are needed, and McLaren is considering additional upgrades before the year ends. These might have to be rolled over to the 2024 car, especially given tyre degradation concerns at Spa. Despite improvements, there are challenges ahead for McLaren. Tracks like Zandvoort and Singapore, with their slow and long corners, could pose difficulties. Furthermore, both Norris and Piastri have noted that while the car may be faster, it hasn't necessarily become easier to handle across various speed ranges. This points to lingering issues that date back over 5 years. McLaren has warned that certain tracks and race weekends may reveal more of the car's weaknesses than strengths. With back-to-back races on tracks that featured F1 races earlier in the summer, McLaren could potentially be exposed. It's clear the Woking-based squad have their work cut out for them during the summer, but if they could turn their season around by this extent, they can surely work this issue out as well. Let us know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. Do you think McLaren can bounce back from this? Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one.